subconsciously, we all become our dads in some way or another. My dad was a building block of the Al Borland character. He was a builder. He was just very kind of matter of fact, knew what he was doing and didn't showboat. Before I got Home Improvement, my wife and I were caterers, whatever, to make ends meet. I used to going, oh God, is this going to be my son's life? You know, is he ever going to be able to find something? My name is Richard, and I am one of the lucky ones. I was just at my high school reunion, and I'm talking to a couple of my friends, and one of them worked at the lumberyard that my dad would go to all the time. And, Carl said, yeah, your dad would come in, we'd have a great time, we'd talk all the time, but he was worried about you. He was worried. Maybe why he was worried, because it was 35 when I got Home Improvement, and early 30s is really your time as a young adult to start making your generational wealth. Because he never would say that to me. And I didn't hear that from anybody else. But Carl was just saying it in passing, but it was like, he was worried about me. I wasn't cognizant of the fact that he was worrying, but now that I'm a parent with a son who wants to be an actor, I know all of that worry, because I think one of his strongest memories of me as an actor was one of the first plays he went to see me at the University of Washington, where I'm literally a spear carrier. I'm standing there with a spear, and I have like one line, and he's going, oh God, is this going to be my son's life? Is he ever going to be able to find something? He was born in 27, so a lot of his formative years were during the Depression. He wasn't cheap, but he was frugal. He was a builder and very competent. He built the house we grew up in for $9,000 and then sold the other ones on the block for $16,000. And he felt that was fair. My life at home was a happy home. It just seemed so normal and natural. He would come down and play catch with me, and he'd make these big, sandwiches with cheese and salami, and he was there if I needed homework. Came to all the high school football games, and he was just always there. He was funny about whatever happened during the day in an odd, kind of like a stand-up, being around Tim Allen and a bunch of other stand-ups in my career who come and they just talk about what happened to them earlier or yesterday or the day before, and they just kind of weave this thing, and it's funny. And my dad was a little bit like that. At a young age, my dad brought home comedy albums, a Smothers Brothers or a Bill Cosby album, Flip Wilson. And I remember this, I was like, wow, Dad, this is a very funny album, and you just brought it home. He goes, yeah, I thought you'd enjoy that. I remember doing the routines at school. He kind of saw that in me, that little bit of extrovert, and I think he fed that into me, unbeknownst to him, maybe, or me. Before, we moved to California, my dad says to me, he goes, I've been watching a lot of television, and I'm noticing, this Disney company, they reuse a lot of the same actors. You should work with that Disney company. When you go out there, you should look them up. And then I'm thinking, it's not quite how it works, Dad. It's just you don't look up somebody and say, I'd like to work for your company as an actor. It's not like building. You can have the talent and never get the job or get the break. And then Home Improvement was a Disney company. And he looks at me and goes, I told you. It's a good thing you worked with that Disney company. I mean, if I had gone into the family business, who knows what would have happened. But because I watched him, I knew how to do a lot of stuff. And when I got Home Improvement, and I'm Al, the things that would come up, with a lathe or a table saw or like that, all came very naturally because of my dad. I think one of the best compliments he ever gave me about that was, you look like you know what you're doing. And that comes from his whole relationship with me from, youth on to now. He remembers me as, a 10-year-old just bending nails. And I remember the phone call, because he didn't call me a lot. I would call home. He called me and he goes, getting a lot of phone calls from my friends who are watching Home Improvement. That's a good show. You know, that's a really good show. And I could feel the relief, you know, in his voice was really nice to hear. Like, I don't have to worry about you necessarily now. He loved coming to the show, and he would sit there and watch rehearsals all day long. And I couldn't do that. So I would just let him stay there and watch all day long. And I remember the writers would ask him questions. We were doing something with hanging a door. The writers would ask, well, what do you call the, you know, when you secure the door up while you're hanging it? What's that called? And my dad would go, well, we call that a crutch. And they would use him. Every once in a while, he'd be in a scene. And one day he was one of Tim's old teachers, and Tim was getting an award from his college. And my dad was back there in the black robe and the graduation hat. We had a summer cabin up above Seattle. His grandfather, my great-grandfather, homesteaded it back in the 40s. Started out as like one room cabin, and then he tore that down and was building the house that he and my mom were going to retire in. And he had spent years tinkering with the design of this house. He was in the middle of building that house when my mom passed. He took care of my mom when she was going through her chemo and cancer. The house was pretty much done, but then it just kind of didn't get finished for a few years. And during those couple of years, you know, he was regrouping. He didn't feel like he needed to get to that. I convinced him to buy the property next door, and I'm looking at it, and it's sloping down to the lake. And I say to my dad, hey, let's even it out, and we'll have this wonderful side yard. We can play badminton, croquet. Looking at me going, so you think it's about that much? And we go back to the tool museum, you know, because his grandfather, him, his dad, all the tools we ever had are back in the shed. He gets out the level, and he sets up the level. It was like 7 feet to level it out, 7 feet. And he goes, you want to build a retaining wall? And I went, okay. And slowly we get this wall, beautiful wall. And now we have to fill it with dirt. And then my dad said, well, we can't use a little bulldozer that would push the dirt around because that would be too much pressure on that. So we're going to have to do it with a wheelbarrow by hand. So we're taking these mounds of dirt in a wheelbarrow and we're filling it in. And it was a lot of work. And we grew grass over there, and he put a fence up, and he grew these grapevines and stuff along the fence, and it's beautiful. My dad and I got to do a lot of things while he was around, especially after Home Improvement hit. I took him to Disney World, and they had the first annual Father's Day parade. And there we are at Disney World in a convertible, waving. I got a picture of him waving and going like this. I said, that's my dad going like that. When I would take him to these events or go play golf with him, he had a great time. I played in the Bob Hope Chrysler Classic in 1995. We had 4 different pros, and one day was Arnold Palmer. And my dad's walking down the fairway with me and Arnold Palmer, and he turns to me and goes, never in my wildest imagination would I think that this would be something that would happen. My dad passed in 2009. And, he lived a good life. He was 83. I finally sold the family house. And I wish I hadn't. I then do this little movie called Gordon Family Tree, where I play a builder. And I'm doing this monologue, and all of a sudden, this whole thing about my just selling the house, during the filming, it just starts cascading in me. And after that scene, there was like silence, and I had to walk away. I had to go away, and I'm and over in the corner, I'm going, wow, that was like 4 years of therapy in 5 minutes. In fact, that's him right over there with the skill saw. it's the circle of life, you know. People in your life do pass away, and you keep them in your memories.